talking about branding and influence,
Mm.
and I noticed this probably 10, 15 years ago. Most billboards for films,
Mhm.
and the only example I can think of off the top of my head is the Fast and Furious.
Mhm.
It's all about cars,
Mhm.
but on the billboard, um, the like main actor is holding a machine gun or a shotgun,
Mhm.
and then I started noticing all these films and the billboards.
Mhm.
They are glorifying weapons,
The violence.
violence, and the film's not even about that. Or
Mhm.
literally, it may have a snippet.
Mhm.
I mean, what's your view on like marketing and like, you know, let's say making our young like people visualize violence in a you know, in the wrong way?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to look at the trajectory in terms of what you're trying to do when it comes to branding, for instance. So first and foremost, especially when it comes to branding, is identifying what your brand is all about. And what's the DNA of your brand, for instance? So it's like when I work with clients, the first thing I've always tried to do is to sit down with them and get them to tell me about what they're trying to achieve. What is their brand? What's the ethos? What's the old emphasis of what your brand is and what you're trying to project? And then I would sit back and think about it. Okay, they're trying to reach this audience. So I'd think about what concepts I want to come up with in terms of targeting that audience, and also the core message in terms of marketing of what I'm trying to portray. So sometimes with these movies and what they think like glorifying violence is what's going to attract a certain audience. It's a bit like, I've been speaking to a couple of my business partners, and we're talking about the same kind of thing with music, for instance, and the content in terms of music, which is being portrayed. Now, music itself have a major influence on the people, on the listeners who's listening to it. Again, depends on what age group you're going to be working with and so forth. But advertising companies know that. One of the tricks that I know that some of the advertising companies used to use is like when we were doing packaging design for like Kellogg's or any cornflakes things or whatever. They used to put like gimmicks of toys and so forth into these packaging. Now,
I remember that.
that was the only way the product would move off the shelf. The kids weren't really interested.
I wasn't interested
in terms of
that.
what was the cereal. It was more about what was in there. And that's what I'm talking about, the influence. So the influence in terms of violence and so forth, they think, if it's a shoot up film, it may attract certain things and attract certain audience. And that's the kind of tools that they use. But, if you want to really attract the right audience, it's about knowing what the brand is about and the messages that you want to send through.
I can only speak on my generation. I used to I still listen to Snoop Dogg, Biggie, Tupac. And, as a kind of teenager, I'm just singing along to the words. And now I listen as a father of daughters, and I listen back to the music. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's just kind of part of my childhood, but also I knew it was just for entertainment.
Yeah.
Do you think our generation right now have kind of lost that kind of real life situations, and literally because of the entertainment that people see, that's the reason why certain things are going wrong at this present time?
Fully agree. I think you kind of have to differentiate between the correlation between the music in terms of the content that's been used and what the real world is about. And I think some of the main cause of the problem is that children have been exposed to too much too quickly. So we look at the advent, for instance, of social media, and parents thinking, you know what, little Johnny needs a new iPhone this or an iPhone that because their friends have got it. And kids, I heard someone said it once, you can kind of negotiate with terrorists, but you can't negotiate with kids, because when kids want things, it is what it is. It's a no-brainer. I know it sounds a bit bad, but it's sometimes very much like that. And because sometimes with parents as well, they'll reminisce on when they were those kids' age, and they'll think about the things that they hadn't attained or hadn't received. And their mindset is like, well, my parents didn't give me that when I was young, so I need to give it to my children because I don't want them to go through what I went through. So you then start kind of spoiling your children in terms of what you're giving them. And now you're giving them all these gadgets to play with. They're now exposed to all this different information, content, music, and so forth. And I remember having this conversation with quite a few people. And they used to say to me, do you think kids playing shoot up game is going to influence in them anyway? It's just a game they can do. I said, yes, it does. Yes, it does influence them. I'm a grown man. I don't watch horror movies now. I don't watch them. I don't watch horror movies because if I watch horror movies, it implants something on my mind.